Families did their own gardening, farming, cattle raising, all the things that we needed. We had that here. It was just a beautiful place to live.
That was then. Mossville is now surrounded by chemical plants.
It's sort of jarring to just like all of a sudden be walking through this area with all these trees and you just look over and see this plant with all that smoke and everything sort of billowing out. When you see something like that, what do you think?
You say, well, I don't know if it's good smoke or bad smoke.
Good smoke or bad smoke? I've asked myself the same question when I see a smokestack. Is that just steam? Or is it something worse? We wanted to hear directly from the companies in Mossville, so we contacted the managers at all the chemical plants nearby. None would appear on camera. Several said, let this man, Larry DeRussell, at the Lake Area Industry Alliance, speak for them.
They have no ill effects on the local community. There's no connection between those health issues and the plants. And the plants have been there for many, many years.
That's what DeRussell says. And I can tell you, it's a bitter pill for people here in Mossville to swallow.
I was really curious what the people of Mossville were experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So we put up some signs around town asking them if they wanted to talk about it. And they did. Take a look. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. By show of hands, how many of you live within a mile of some sort of chemical plant? Just about all of you. How many people here have had either themselves or a family member affected in some way, either through illness or something else, because of what they believe to be the chemical plants?
I had kidney cancer. I had one kidney removed.
Encephalitis.
I had to be given steroids because I had bad asthma.
All these health problems.
I have a white blood count that is dropping. Every 2 years it's going down.
Both my kidneys is gone.
As a doctor, I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Go to dialysis 3 days a week.
My daughter suffered with endometriosis to the point to where she had to have a total hysterectomy done. I ended up having a total hysterectomy like most young women do in this area, and they really don't like to discuss it.
Most young women have hysterectomies.
Yes.
You did? Ma'am, you did too? And you believe it's because, again, of this pollution?
Chemical detective Wilma Subra has been studying Mossville's pollution for years. She lives 100 miles down the road in New Iberia, Louisiana.
All of those people are being heavily exposed to a large quantity of very toxic chemicals.
How long have you been involved with the people of Mossville?
Since the very early 70s, when I helped them understand what the issues were, what the chemicals were being released, what form they were taking as they were released, and then looking at their health impacts.
You're sort of like an Aaron Brockovich, like a modern-day Aaron Brockovich.
I've been doing this way before Aaron was doing it.
We have been screaming and yelling and fighting for years about our human rights are being violated. And it's about
Dorothy Felix and Wilma Subra. Passion and reason. Trying to put an end to what they see as a terrifying tale in Mossville. Take a look at these snapshots. Friends and neighbors, dying young, too young, many from cancer. Down the road on a nearby bayou, Harold Areno. He remembers what it used to be like.
You could live off the land because there was plenty out there to eat.
Areno's father rented boats to out-of-towners fishing in the bayou. But there was a problem. The fish started dying. And then something Harold Areno could not have predicted. His own family started getting sick.
I had cancer, then my brother-in-law, my sister, they had cancer. And the other brother-in-law and sister had cancer. And my mother had cancer. And before industry came here, nobody in the family or that we knew they ever had cancer. So
you had 8 people out of 10 get cancer.
Right here on 40 acres when they made sure.
Bone cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, bladder cancer. I can tell you as a doctor, the chances of that happening are incredibly rare.
I'm very angry. I'm very angry that these plants will have taken a lot of energy, my life, future life away from me. Once you have cancer, you have to understand this. Once you have cancer, I'm in remission now, but once you have cancer, you live with a fear because this cancer can come back at any time. And most of the time, when it comes back a second time, it's worse.
Diane Prince was diagnosed with ovarian cancer 6 years after she and her husband David moved the family across the street from a vinyl chloride plant in Mossville. She wasn't the only family member who got sick after moving there.
My daughter, about 14, 15 years old, was diagnosed with endometriosis. My youngest son experienced extreme headaches, and my youngest daughter had extreme sinus problems.
On top of the health problems, there were daily aggravations.
Trains passing every hour, the blowing of horns, the noise from the plant. It just drove me crazy.
And there were smells.
They would say, yes, we had a small release, but it didn't cross the fence line. What kind of barrier is that? It must reach into the ionosphere somewhere.
Didn't cross the fence line? How could they possibly measure that?
What happens is when there is an incident that occurs, the plants have personnel that they send out with monitors at different places within the plant and within the community, and some on the fence line to make a determination as to just how far the effect, if any, has gone. And there are minor incidents where it doesn't reach the fence line.
They came over, the plant, they came over with their little monitoring equipment and in our home and say, oh, nothing is wrong. We don't smell it, right? And that was not true. That wasn't true at all. The whole family could smell it. The community, my neighbors could smell it, but they couldn't smell it.
The Princes and their neighbors would learn about a secret, something happening right under their feet. But first, I wanted to know more. There's only so much you can see from the ground.
Take a look down here. What you're looking at used to be the center of a rural community. There are now 14 chemical plants down there. Many of these chemical plants came here because of the promise of no property taxes by the state. We have coal-fired energy plants, petrochemical plants, chemical plants. Many of them making the raw materials for plastics.
In order to understand Mossville, you have to understand plastic. The first plastics plants arrived right after World War II, part of a nationwide boom. The future was plastic. The Graduate, in 1968, captured the mood.
I just want to say one word to you. Just one word. Yes, sir. I'm listening, just so you... Plastics.
Plastic is anything we ask it to be.
Plastic has changed our lives. The most common, polyvinyl chloride, PVC. It's everywhere. In pipes, vinyl siding, windows, and other building materials. It's in cars, in shower curtains, phones, flooring, storage containers, lunch boxes, in toys, in hospitals, IV bags, and tubing.
And most importantly, perhaps, they're also in our homes. Just about everywhere you look. Laptop computer, for example. That has PVC in it. Even a simple bucket like this. Flip it over. You see the number 3? That means PVC. Children's toys. One clue. If they're softer, more malleable, that's a clue that PVC is in it. Speaking of kids, incidentally, what about school supplies? Pencils and pens. They often have PVC. Even a simple binder like this also has it. And these hard-to-open clamshell boxes. Part of the reason they're so hard to open is because of PVC. But in order to have all these supplies that we become so dependent on, we need to make a lot of PVC. More than 12 billion pounds a year. And that, many environmentalists say, is a problem.
Next, an alarming leak. Toilets full of poison. And the campaign to keep it secret.
date order to the T.
To understand why Dorothy Felix and Wilma Subra are on a crusade, you need to know what happened to the Prince family and their neighborhood in Mossville, Louisiana.
Let me get on a picture. Because she's the cook, not me.
David and Diane Prince suspected that chemicals blowing over from the neighboring vinyl chloride plant were making them sick. But here's what they didn't know. There was also pollution underground. Thousands of gallons of a highly toxic chemical called EDC, ethylene dichloride, seeping beneath their neighborhood. We wanted to find someone who worked at the plant and was willing to talk. So we tracked down Ray Reynolds in Mayhill, New Mexico.
I worked at Condea Vista, and I was also chairman of the union.
The 52-year-old Reynolds suffers from a rare blood disorder called demyelinating toxic neuropathy. It's a condition he blames on chemical exposure. Nowadays, he says the mountain air is good for his health.
I have complete kidney failure, which means without this machine, I would have maybe 2 to 3 weeks to live. The body, I would die.
Reynolds travels for dialysis twice a week. When he worked at Condea Vista, Reynolds says the plant water was contaminated with EDC. That's ethylene dichloride. The chemical is heated to almost 1,000 degrees, a process called cracking, to produce the vinyl chloride. EDC is a suspected carcinogen that can damage the liver, kidneys, and nervous system. We decided to investigate. We got a hold of this internal document. Take a look at this. The EDC problem at the plant was so bad, this internal memo shows, the chemical dripped from the ceiling. It even backed up in the toilets. Because of the contamination, workers wanted managers to warn visitors to not even wash their hands in the water.
We threatened to go to court and bring in our own union testers to test it. They wouldn't test the water, you see. So as a compromise to us, over every place that there was a water outlet, they would put "do not drink."
And here's the thing. That contamination wasn't just inside the plant. As these documents filed with the state of Louisiana show, plant managers knew, as far back as the early 80s, there was an underground leak of EDC. And management knew the underground plume of EDC was spreading into Mossville.
Common sense and gravity would tell you that they're getting EDC out of their wells. Of course they had the right to know, and they should have known.
But the company never told nearby residents, like David and Diane Prince, they might be in harm's way. In fact, in this 1991 meeting agenda, there's even a handwritten note. Vista feels a public hearing is unnecessary.
If I have EDC under my property, I need to know about it. If it could possibly affect my health, I need to know about it.
It wasn't until December 1995, more than a decade after the company began trying to contain the contamination, that Condea Vista notified Mossville residents.
I consider this a vicious, very vicious act, a criminal act, where this chemical escaped and it was not reported to the public. It was just left there.
Sasol, which bought Condea Vista in 2001, had no comment on what happened, saying it would be inappropriate for us to comment on events that happened prior to our becoming the owners of the company. Larry D. Russell of the Lake Area Industry Alliance said he couldn't talk about the chemical leak either.
That is an incident that relates to a specific company, and you know, I'm not in a position to be able to discuss issues related to specific companies.
This is vinyl PVC pipe.
Alan Blakey, a spokesman for the vinyl industry, says what happened was the exception, not the rule.
In most instances, the communities are doing very well living right next door to the plants, and the relationships are generally good.
Authorities never accused Condea Vista of doing anything illegal, but the underground contamination did not go over well in Mossville.
You know, residents of this Mossville neighborhood were pretty upset. In fact, more than 1,000 of them banded together to file a groundwater contamination class action lawsuit. They won that lawsuit, but something else happened here as well. Residents over here, these close-knit neighbors, They all started to scatter, fled the pollution, leaving this neighborhood really abandoned. And part of Mossville's history was lost for good.
I can't bring my children back here and say, this is where Mama grew up at. This is where you was born, the house that I brought you home in. And I can't do that anymore because it don't exist. You know, it just doesn't exist anymore. And I think it's unfair for them to just rob you. That's like raping you of your history.
This was a street. Homes were back there. And it's just, for me, it is just sad to know that this is barricaded like this, because I saw when this was developed to a very good area.
Is this place a toxic place forever, or is it fixable?
Well, as you see, it's empty lots. So the industry owns these lots and obviously have made the decision it's not fixable, or they'll expand onto this land. It'll never be residential again.
David and Diane Prince were among the people driven from the land they loved.
Sight to behold to see him lift the whole house and just carried on his way.
His wife, Diane, she loved that house.
She wanted to live in here, in this house. I think she enjoyed the high ceilings here. She just liked to sit on the porch.
Meanwhile, Diane's cancer had returned, and it was worse than before. She died on October 6, 2005. Diane Prince was 59 years old.
It would seem, anyway, they're more protective of the almighty dollar than in human health. And the community of Mossville seemed like it lost their God-given right to human health. I mean, nobody cares. Nobody cares. As long as they're not seemingly affected by what they do. And they don't worry about it. They're not concerned about it. It's not us. It is those poor people in Mossville. That's the attitude. That's the attitude you get.
I can only go back to what I know. And what I know is how the plants are operated. What I know is the results of the various studies that have been provided that have indicated that, there's no connection between those health issues and the plants.
Next, the people of this toxic town fight back. And Wilma Subra finds what looks like the smoking gun.
Dorothy Felix knew her community was suffering. In fact, not long after an underground chemical spill turned this neighborhood into a ghost town, a University of Texas researcher did a health survey in Mossville and concluded the community was very sick. Residents were worrying about dioxin, often called the most toxic chemical known. And they convinced the Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ATSDR, to perform blood tests.
They found that the dioxin in the blood levels of these residents that were tested had 3 times the elevation of people in this country. So the levels are extremely high.
Where were these dangerous chemicals coming from? The federal agency concluded that the source, quote, was not known.
We're surrounded by 14 chemical plants in this area. 14.
In spite of those high blood dioxin levels, the Department of Health and Hospitals concluded no further investigation is needed.
Come down just a little bit in your side.
Dorothy Felix and her friends in the local environmental group, Mossville Environmental Action Now, were outraged, and they decided to launch their own investigation. Their lead detective, Wilma Subra. Subra is a chemist who has made it her life's mission to help places like Mossville.
Other than sulfur smell, what kind of smell do you have in your water?
Communities across the United States and around the world now ask her for help. Subra used to work for government agencies and companies testing for toxic chemicals, but they didn't let her tell the local people what she found. And Subra didn't like that.
So in 1981, I said, okay, it's time for me to do this on behalf of the communities.
She received the MacArthur Genius Grant for her work in 1999. And she's also gotten her share of threats.
Oh, I get harassed all the time.
You get harassed? Like,
yeah.
What happens?
My office got broken into a large number of times, and then I had a drive-by shooting while I was in the office.
They wanted you dead?
Well, they hid it by the door, and I was sitting in front of the window right next to the door. I think they were more scared, trying to scare me and get me to back off. This is where the bullet hit the brick.
Subra simply moved her desk away from the window and got back to work.
Right now, I'm probably working on somewhere around 30 active issues.
In Mossville, her focus is dioxin.
How bad is it?
It's one of the most toxic substances known to man.
One of the most toxic substances known to man. What does that really mean? Well, first of all, dioxins are toxic in parts per trillion. Let me give you a little bit more context. This is 1 drop of food coloring. This is 1 swimming pool. Take a look at what happens. Here's the thing. If that were dioxin, it would still be toxic, even if this were 130,000 swimming pools.
When the dioxin's being released on an ongoing basis, you keep bioaccumulating that in your body.
You're going to hear a lot more about Subra's detective work in Mossville. But first, dioxins. Now, you may know more about them than you think. Agent Orange contained dioxin. American soldiers in Vietnam used Agent Orange, an herbicide that got its name because of the orange stripes in the storage barrels. Dioxin was an unwanted impurity in the production process. The U.S. military used the defoliant to clear away thick jungle and reveal Viet Cong forces. But Agent Orange had another effect. In the decades that followed, soldiers exposed to Agent Orange were more likely to develop a range of cancers, and possibly Parkinson's disease, diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. And that brings us back to Mossville. Toxicologist Richard Lipsey studied health effects of dioxins in Agent Orange for the EPA. He says dioxin levels found in the blood of Mossville residents are dangerously high. If you're wondering, Lipsey has no connection to anyone in Mossville, the residents, or the companies.
In Mossville, it's 3 times too high, which means it's being stored not only in their fat, but it's being stored in their pancreas. You're going to see a lot of diabetes. It's being stored in their liver. You're going to see liver cancer. It's being stored in their kidneys and in their brains. So are there going to be adverse health effects? Yes.
But where was the dioxin coming from? To answer that question, Wilma Subra came up with a plan right out of a police detective's handbook. Looked for fingerprints. You see, dioxin is not a single chemical, but a family of chemicals, and each has its own chemical fingerprint.
It clearly makes a different fingerprint from the sources. The vinyl chloride manufacturing facilities have high concentrations of specific ones. So you can clearly see where it's coming from.
In other words, she could see if the dioxins coming from the chemical plants were the same ones ending up in the people of Mossville, like David and Diane Prince. And when she made the comparison, Subra says dioxins in the blood matched those coming from 5 nearby chemical plants and the local power plant.
The highest match was Georgia Gulf.
In fact, the 5 most common dioxins in Mossville residents matched the most common dioxins coming from the Georgia Gulf plant.
To me, that's a smoking gun.
We asked Georgia Gulf about that, but they wouldn't talk to us. Instead, they left it to Alan Blakey at the Vinyl Institute.
I don't really know Wilma Subra's studies, but I don't think she's a medical doctor. I don't think she did a medical evaluation, and I'm pretty sure she did not get external peer review of her study.
Lipsey does do peer review for several scientific journals, so we asked him to look at Subra's report.
I think the science is good. I think it's an excellent report. I thought it was very logical.
Can you conclusively say that there was a health impact from the stuff being released into these people?
The dioxin that's released by this facility matches the fingerprint of the dioxin in their blood.
Did those dioxins make people sick?
Yes, yes.
You could say for sure?
Yes. Absolutely.
Next, see what happens when Wilma Subra's report finally goes public and a decade of frustration boils over for Dorothy Felix.
These plants are killing us, and you have just turned the damn tide This is a very exciting day for our community. We are extremely thrilled about being able to host such a wonderful event.
It was at a Mossville Health Fair last summer when finally a decade of frustration boiled over for Dorothy Felix. It happened during a presentation by the EPA.
And the people of Mossville has turned to you because you are supposed to protect the people, the human beings of this environment. You have not. Your agencies have not done one thing. These plants are killing us, and you have just turned a deaf eye that you don't know what's going on.
EPA Regional Director Samuel Coleman promised the agency would investigate potential health hazards. To a point.
What we will not do is to come in and say, your health is directly injured because of X. That's not what we do. So we're not going to say that your health is impacted. We'll say
even more alarming to Felix and others in Mossville, the EPA concluded Subra was wrong when she said the dioxins could be traced to Georgia Gulf. The report said these same types of dioxins are typically found in people living throughout the United States.
We were just not able to agree with the findings that she presented.
Federal agencies are very slow to say, folks in Mossville, you got a problem. Because if they do, they've got to do something about that problem.
So who is supposed to do something about all this? What about the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry? Remember ATSDR? They did the blood tests, the ones that found the high dioxin levels. In 1998, they hired Chicago doctor Peter Orris as a dioxin expert to advise them on Mossville. His advice? Polluters should help pay for health care.
I thought the local industry, since they knew they were putting these chemicals into the environment, should extend the health insurance that they had for their workers to the local community.
ATSDR ignored the advice, and the head of the Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals called Orris, quote, an outsider with, quote, unscientific opinions.
I was surprised by his response, I must say.
It's really tough to have to go back to Mossville over and over again, to meet with the agencies over and over again, and see no progress.
We expected ATSDR, when they started with us, to come out and work with us. But no, ATSDR has dropped the ball on us and has done nothing. So he needs to come back to Mossville and finish his job.
Part of the problem is setting these lines in the sand as if there's a clear distinction between safe and unsafe.
He is Dr. Howard Frumpkin, head of ATSDR, when I met up with him.
I think every American should expect to breathe clean air and to drink clean water and to eat clean food.
Based on that, did this agency or any other agency fail the people of Mossville then?
I think that as an overall system, with all of the agencies, all of the companies, all of the stakeholders who were involved, we probably haven't done as much as we could.
They say the agency has to finish the job.
This is a question about the tools in the toolbox. What our agency can do and has done, and we're continuing now, is scientifically characterize the exposures, take a look at the health impacts. But our toolbox doesn't include solutions like relocation.
So, EPA says it doesn't deal with individuals who might be sickened by pollution. And ATSDR says even if it finds people sickened by industry, they can't do much either. Dorothy Felix still isn't giving up.
I intend to stay with this fight so that my granddaughter, if she chooses to live here in this community, will have a safe place to live, a safe environment.
Here's what Felix and others specifically want. That residents who want to leave should be relocated, and those who do stay should get free health care from the government or industry.
It may be that going forward we need to be thinking about the locations of industrial facilities and the locations of where people live and keeping a healthy distance between them.
Are we going to find out 40, 50 years from now that some of the things that we thought were safe
are in fact a lot more dangerous than we thought?
We may well. And we need to be
That's sort of
open-minded.
scary. I mean, because you hear so much dogma coming from folks at the Environmental Protection Agency. This is fine. Don't worry about it. It's safe. But then as science changes, it may not be, as with lead.
As time goes on, naturally we get better and better at appreciating the effects of chemicals at low levels of exposure. And that's led us to lower the acceptable levels of many chemicals, including lead.
You can't prove the cause and effect relationship here. That's as hard as you might try, that's the problem. You can't prove the effect.
You can trace the chemical as it comes across into the community. You can detect it in the community where the people live, and it correlates to the health impacts.
Next, the investigation heats up, and Dr. Gupta takes his questions straight to the top, to the head of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Every time they would have a release, they would say, oh, it didn't cross the fence line. They had some magical vacuum, I guess.
In Mossville, Dorothy Felix, David Prince, and local environmentalists try to rally support.
This is a group of religious institutional investors who use their role as shareholders to encourage corporations to change behaviors that are unjust, that cause trouble for folks, that create public health concerns. And Mossville is a center of the universe around some of the issues of corporate irresponsibility.
And that's what I heard as well at a meeting with people who call this place home.
They're not going to build in the rich neighborhood because the rich neighborhood going to get them out before they even get started. If you just look around, most of the minority communities is where they build these plants. And they don't care. Life is nothing to them. It's all about that dollar.
The plants are very responsive to the community. They are just environmentally responsible, very conscientious about being a good neighbor.
Spokesman Larry DeRussell and Louisiana state officials say industry is not making people in Mossville sick. DeRussell sent us this stack of reports, including one from the state, which says the cancer rate in Calcasieu Parish, where Mossville is located, is no worse than Louisiana as a whole. We also got a federal report saying dioxin levels in people's blood in Calcasieu Parish are similar to a nearby parish.
And each one of their reports says that, there are no health-related issues related to the industry in this area and the emissions that are reported.
Subra says the studies don't mean much because they look at the whole county and don't focus just on Mossville. Part of the problem is this. After nearly 2 decades of research, the EPA has not set an official limit for airborne dioxins in Mossville or anywhere else for that matter.
I do feel that I have a tremendous responsibility.
Not long after she took office, I met up with EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson. There's been 18 years of studies out there on dioxin. Does it cause cancer?
Well, EPA needs to speak to that, right? And you don't want me to do it because I'm not an MD like you, and I'm an engineer by training. But what we owe the American people is a final risk assessment for dioxin.
Since then, the EPA did announce standards for dioxin in the soil, but still nothing on airborne dioxin. The agency now promises a draft assessment by the end of 2010. Some companies aren't waiting. Computer giant Hewlett-Packard, Kaiser Permanente, Office Depot, Office Max, Nike, Ford, Apple, all of them using less polyvinyl chloride. That's right, no PVC in the new iPad, less manufacturing, and in the long term, less PVC waste to burn. All in all, it could mean less dioxin in the environment. Back in Mossville, the plants are still making millions of pounds of vinyl chloride every year. Wilma Subra says chemical industry lobbyists in Louisiana have talked state lawmakers out of passing any dioxin standards. I mean, how can this happen?
Because their permit levels don't set a dioxin limit.
That sounds kind of, like someone's not doing their job. I mean, if you're convinced that it's so toxic, and I've heard that, what am I missing here? Why hasn't some of this been done? We're talking about human health here.
If we go to the state legislature and try and get adoption of dioxin standards. The industry's going to be there day in and day out, making sure we do not succeed.
But don't think she's giving up. Next, a showdown in the state capitol.
And this is really unfair.
As Wilma Subra and Dorothy Felix try to get this fixed once and for all.
I asked Wilma Subra and Dorothy Felix to meet me in Baton Rouge, the state capital.
It has not been done.
As I looked for answers on what the state was doing to protect the people of Mossville. How receptive, Wilma, have people been to your concerns?
At the Capitol, the legislators, the senators, and the representatives, absolutely no concern, don't want to hear it.
They won't even listen to you?
They won't even listen to us. Because when they listen to me, then they know I'm going to ask them to introduce legislation that would reduce the concentrations of dioxin being released into the air and into the water.
We wanted to see the governor. I had tried calling several times. He was always too busy to talk.
We were trying to see if we can get on Governor Jindal's schedule.
So I thought I'd try and catch him here in his office. Well, this has been all about trying to find answers, trying to really get to the bottom of some of these issues. We've made repeated attempts to try and get in touch with the governor of Louisiana to talk about some of these issues, and we have been repeatedly turned down. We made an appointment here, the Department of Health and Hospitals in Louisiana. We flew to Baton Rouge, had a scheduled appointment. At the last moment, they literally canceled on us. At the Department of Environmental Quality, another roadblock.
What we've heard so far is they're not even going to let you guys in the meeting. Does that surprise you?
Yes, today, that surprises me. 20 years ago, no. But today, yes. I mean, what are they fearful of?
We just keep coming back. This is not the last time we will be here. We're coming back again. So they might as well get ready for it and accept us now. And all we want to do is let them know that Mossville is still suffering. There are people that are still dying.
Let's give them a call maybe and see if I can help try and get you into the meeting there. He's literally calling into that building right now. Yeah, I was just calling you on the phone.
Oh, good.
We were excited to come meet with you.
And we're glad you did.
And we're hoping to bring Wilma and Dorothy in as well.
We can't do that.
Why not?
Because if we open it up to others who are interested, then we'd have to be open up to industry folks as well, and they would probably want to have their lawyers represented as well. And we haven't set that up, and we have, our scientists who want to provide you information in an interview type of atmosphere.
What if they just listen? What if they don't say anything?
No, it wouldn't be appropriate.
We have come from Mossville to here to just sit in a room, and you won't allow that?
We really try to be as open and fair and honest as any state agency can be. And if you don't feel like you're getting the proper treatment, I'm sorry. And if it's going to be, where now you don't want to interview us on the topic, then that's just going to be the case.
No, I mean, we definitely want to talk. I mean, I think this is all about trying to get as many answers as possible.
I agree.
Answers. Like whether Mossville's high blood dioxin levels were making people sick.
These blood levels would not result in any clinical health effects.
When they say that around Mossville, 10,000 pounds of vinyl chloride, 112,000 pounds of benzene, EDC 29,000 pounds a year. I mean, should people be worried about that sort of thing?
What we've seen in the Mossville community, concentrations in air, in soil, in drinking water are well below levels of concern.
Try telling that to Dorothy Felix and Wilma Subra. They're plenty concerned. The state government may have tuned them out, but they now have the federal government's ear. This winter, after CNN began reporting on Mossville, the Environmental Protection Agency said for the first time it would test to see if Mossville qualifies as a Superfund site, as one of America's most toxic towns. That could mean money for cleanup and maybe relocation. Testing began in April.
This is a very important day. It's a day that should have come a long time ago. We have traveled a long journey, and I feel like victory is close.
All of Mossville's Crusaders have lived to see these victories, and we'll never know for sure whether living in Mossville made David Prince sick. During the filming of this documentary, he died after a fire in his home.
Would I live in Mossville? Personally, if I had a choice, no. You wouldn't either. You're going to want to live in a safe environment, free of elevated levels of any human carcinogen.
I would not be concerned living in a plant community because I know a lot about the regulations and about the industry's commitment to compliance with these regulations. I would feel safe and protected living there.
If I got a fair price to get out, I would leave.
How are we doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. When I think about it and think how hard my grandparents worked for this piece of property and how they prayed for it and hoped for it and cried for it and labored for it, it would be sad to just say, I'm gone.
Go get them and drive.
If I decided to leave, everyone in my family would have to agree to it. I would leave no one because we were here together and we leave together if we have to.
In real life, there are few perfect endings, few cut and dried conclusions. One thing I've learned during this year-long investigation, to some extent, we are all living on the fence line, all of us. Like the people of Mossville, we are potentially exposed to dangerous chemicals.